Well, thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Chris, and I love to quilt. So I have Angela and Lori. They're going to be my professional quilt holders. My Vanna Whites. I am not a professional. I'm not an expert. I'm just someone who loves the fabrics and the colors and the designs and cutting them up in little tiny pieces and trying to figure out how I'm going to put them back together to make a beautiful quilt. How many of you have homemade quilts at home? Yay! I love to see that. You do, you know how special they are. They're special because they're made with someone's two hands. They're special because they're made using someone's mind and their imagination. Most of all, they're special because they come from the heart. When something comes from the heart, then there's a story to be told. And that's the name of my talk tonight. Every quilt tells a story. Tonight, I'd like to tell you about the journey of some different people in their lifetimes, and also a little bit about my journey in my life. I like to do that through my quilts and the story that they have to tell. So, first of all, this is the quilt that I made during the lockdown of COVID. This is called You Are My Sunshine. And that's a song that I like to sing to my kids and grandkids and nieces and nephews. So I made one of these. Actually, I made 12 of those. And so I thought that looked kind of cool. So I laid them out on the grass in between our house and the shed that we have. And my husband got up on the peak of the roof of the house and he took a picture. So this is the picture for Ted. Oh, it looks like a quilt. Then I'm in the middle of it just to show perspective of how big that was. Sometimes I get carried away. This next one is I made it for my husband. Went to quilt retreat January. I think it was in January. Went to quilt retreat and I made this quilt. This is only the second one I've made for him, and I've made hundreds, so it's not finished. I don't have the binding on it. So. And I found a lady that was there, and she had an embroidery machine, so she put the name in there, and it stayed. Oh wow! This next one is a quilt that I made 20 some years ago. And I just like the colors, was playing with shading, darks and lights. And so this is simply called Hearts. It's one of my favorites. So, sometimes I just kind of sew fabric together. This is the same quilt that I made about a year ago, only it's with some new modern tulip pink type fabrics. So just to show you how different the same pattern can be by using different new fabrics. This first set of quilts tells a story of a specific time, the 30s. And this quilt is made out of reproduction fabrics. They're fabrics that were made to look like actual 30s fabrics. And to me, I think it's like Pepto-Bismol pink and lime green jello colors. And they use the cutesy little designs in their fabric. So this is typical, the pattern is typical of the 30s.
Wonder why she's hanging on.
During the 30s, women would go to the feed stores and pick out the feed sacks according to the fabrics that they wanted to make their clothing and their quilts out of. So these are some actual feed sacks that they might have chosen from.
Oh.
This quilt was made out of reproduction fabrics, but also some actual 30s fabrics. And I had a friend, her name was Carol, and she let me go through her stash. And if you've ever know anything about someone's stash, you know how cool that is to be able to pick out fabrics. So I come up with 120 different fabrics. and I made the teacups. And that is a typical pattern of 30s also. And one of the teacups, I don't know what happened, but the handle got on the wrong side. He has no handle. I don't know. People often ask me, how long does it take for you to make a quilt? Well, I don't really know how to answer that because I usually have 5, 10, 15, sometimes 20 quilts going at a time. But this quilt, I was hand appliquing these little handles on there, and each handle took 15 minutes. So just a little trivia about how long it takes me to make a quilt.
Oh. Wow.
This next quilt is a reproduction of a quilt that might have been made during the 1830s. And during the 1830s, women were not allowed to speak out politically. And so, as you know, as women, we can figure out a way to get our messages across. And so the woman that might have made a quilt like this, she hid her message in the pattern itself. Can anyone tell me what this pattern might have meant?
Oh.
It forms a T, was T for temperance. So we know how that woman felt about alcohol.
Oh.
This quilt was a reproduction of a quilt that might have been made during World War I. And during World War I, they would charge a penny, a nickel, or if they were lucky, they'd get a dime, and then they would embroider the person's name in it, and then they would sell this quilt and make money to buy supplies for the soldiers. It's called a Red Cross quilt. This next set of quilts tells stories of the Civil War. And during the Civil War, women were still not allowed to speak out politically. And so they would hide little messages in their fabric. And this, where's it at? There we go. This one here, it says, may the use of our needles prick the consciousness of slaveholders. So we know how that woman felt about slavery. These are the colors of the Civil War time. I thought when I first started working with them that they were going to be dark and ugly, but I really enjoyed working with the Civil War reproductions. This next one is called a friendship block. And especially the northern women would make a block like this, and they would document things like births of babies or weddings or how they felt about things politically or just things that were going on in their lifetime. And so then they would come together and they would put them together, and this is a friendship quilt. This next one, the pattern itself is called double Irish chain, and it's just symbolic of the chains that bound the slaves at that time. As the slaves fled from the plantations, they followed what was called the Underground Railroad. And that was simply a group of people who were trying to help them to get from the plantations to the north or to freedom. And so this pattern is called Underground Railroad, and it's leading to the Northern Star. The star goes up. Thank you. These are my professional. This quilt has a map in it, and it just shows the route of the Underground Railroad. Oops. As the slaves started leaving the plantations, they didn't know who was out there to help them and who was out there to hurt them. They didn't know who was for slavery or against slavery, and especially like in states like Kansas and Nebraska and Missouri. And so the people of the Underground Railroad came up with these roadmaps to freedom. And this one, the block is called Log Cabin, And traditionally, a log cabin would have a red center to represent the chimney. But if it had a black center like this and it was hanging over the lines or out the window, then that meant that that was a safe place for the slaves to stop and get food and shelter. Most of the slaves had never even been off the plantations, and they didn't have well-documented maps. They didn't even have GPS. And so they used this as a directional map. This is called flying geese. And depending on how they hung it on the fence or the line, these two fabrics are different fabrics pointing a specific direction. So that meant that was the safe route for the slaves to take. So this is a directional map.
Oh.
This one, the pattern is called shoe fly, and it simply meant that there was danger ahead. And so they needed to scatter and then meet back up in a predetermined place. Most of the Southern women felt that it was beneath them to sew, and so they didn't make a lot of quilts. And so instead of making a quilt like they may have made, I chose to make a quilt to show what the Southern women might have worn during that time.
Oh.
That was a fun one to make. It's been folded up, but these are dimensional. It did take a little bit of time. This next set of quilts tells stories about my family. My mom and I used to get together and we would sew and make quilts. And usually I like to figure out the pattern and I'd cut it out. She'd just set at the machine and she would just sew the strips together. Well, I put down my ruler and I'm cutting out my strips and I didn't get done. So the next time we sewed, it was at my house. So mom came up there and I started putting my ruler down and cutting those strips. I'm handing them to her and she said, these aren't working right. I thought, well, what is wrong? This is a fairly simple pattern. Why is it not working? Well, mom had a 6-inch ruler and I had a 5-inch ruler. Cutting those strips out. So we made 4 of these quilts, 2 that had started with a 6-inch and 2 that started with a 5-inch. Mom and I had this dream of opening up a quilt shop. And so one day we did. We opened a quilt shop and the girls that came in, they were so eager to learn new patterns and techniques. And so I had to stay ahead of them to be able to teach them those techniques. They decided they wanted to learn the paper piece. That was popular at that time. And so I went and got a paper piecing pattern. Ooh, say that again. And mom and I and a friend, we got together and we were going to figure out how to paper piece. So this is my paper piecing project. It's called New York Beauty. And they said I couldn't pick the pattern out ever again. I tried to tell them mine didn't need the border, but they wouldn't let me buy the color. Mom and I like to collect different fabrics to make a specific quilt. And so we collected the browns and the golds and we made a little flower basket quilt. And again, that flower basket has a handle, 15 minutes to put those handles on.
And today.
This one reminds me of my youngest daughter, Haley, back there. She was 7 years old and she wanted to learn to sew. Grandma was sewing, mom was sewing, aunts and cousins, everybody was sewing. And so she wanted to make this quilt. And she went and picked out her fabrics, and it's got strawberry shortcake and strawberries in it. And she sewed that one. And then I can remember sitting out on the sidewalk and we were tying that on the sidewalk. So. Yeah. I have 2 sisters. I'm the third one. I have 2 sisters that I love dearly, and we love to get together. And when we get together, we talk and we laugh, and sometimes we dance around. So this is me and my 2 sisters, and we're dancing.
Oh. Question. Did you have a pattern for the women or did you make up the pattern?
Oh, I just made those girls. And they, I have a blonde headed sister and then I have a sister that she wears her hair in a ponytail a lot. So that was me.
That's easy protection.
My mom turned 82 years ago and she wanted to go see Pioneer Woman. So we went down to Oklahoma and while we were there, we had fabric. So I made, there were 5 of us that went down there and I made a quilt for each one of us. And they had these little bags that you put rocks in, you know. So I got one of those little bags and then got a picture of us in there. This one reminds me of my dad. So mom and I were sewing one day and I said, well, those fabrics look a lot like dad's shirts. So I went in and got some of dad's shirts and while he was at work, we cut them up and we put them in this quilt. He wasn't real happy, but now this is one that I really cherish. This is one that reminds me of Curtis's mom, my mother-in-law. She liked the teals and the golds, and I made her this quilt, and then she passed away a couple of years ago, and I got this one back. So just applique the big dragonfly on there.
I'm curious, are the butterflies appliqued on or part of the fabric?
This is part of the fabric. This one is the only one that's appliqued. It was pretty fabric, wasn't it? This next one reminds me of my grandmother. My grandma and great grandma, they lived in Colorado and we'd go out to visit. And when we did, they would let me play with their handkerchiefs and I thought they were so cool. And they would let me take a couple of them home. So I collected them over the years. And a few years back, I put them together. I appliqued them on some fabric and put it together. And this is my handkerchief quilt. This next one reminds me of my niece Diane. She's sitting back there. We like to get together and sew, and she started these quilting parties. And so if you got to go to one of her quilting parties, she would write to different companies and she would get samples of fabric. And one year we got designer silver, we got all kinds of fun things. But we didn't know the first time we went that she had made a quilt for each one of us. So she would ring this bell and we'd get to go and pick out what we wanted. And this is one that I got. I have several of them, but she doesn't like this one. She thought it was so ugly. And I'm like, you have to let me pick first because I want that quilt. We actually made this a year ago when we went to retreat at Charlotte's retreat in Wichita. And we gave away the pattern because it was just, it won. And then we downloaded the pattern again and she made this one. I haven't made another one, but I needed those birds. She always said I bring her ugly quilts to my talk. And so this is one she likes and I love it, but
Usually
that's her teacup quilt. We're always fighting over our quilts. Like, no, I want that one. I'd like to brag on her just a little bit. She has started designing fabrics. And so these are some of the fabrics that she has designed and made a bag out of one of them. But yeah. This next one reminds me of my mom and my stepdad. So several years ago, there were fires that went across the state of Kansas, and at the same time, Newton was having their prom. And so my youngest daughter came home and she said, Mom, I want to make my prom dress. Well, I don't do prom dresses. So we got the fabric and everything, and we loaded up and we went to my mom's in Mineola, Kansas. And when we got there, Mom had fabric all over, and I was like, what are you making, Mom? And she said, well, we've decided that we're going to make some quilts for some of the people that lost their homes in Clark County. And we just want to make some. We can't make one for everybody. And I looked at my mom and I said, why can't you make one for everybody? And so while she's in making prom dress with my daughter, I got out more fabric and lined her sewing machines up and got cutting tables ready. And so for 30 days, people just came in and they sat down and they sewed, or they cut out fabric, or they brought food, or just sat and visited while other people were sewing. And they ended up having 32 quilts to give to each of the families that lost their home in Clark County. She actually made one more and I got it. There's a theme there. I keep getting their foot. Nice thing. It's interesting. The next set of quilts are quilts that tell stories about specific events or how I feel about things or things that were going on in my lifetime. Well, several years back, quite a few years back, scrapbooking became popular. And I thought, well, I want to try that. Everybody was doing that. And so I got some scrapbooking papers and got my pictures and I cut it out and made a page. I didn't like it at all. It was too much work in it where you got this one little page when you're done. And so I thought, well, I'll make my pages on the computer and then I can print them out and give one to each family and everybody can have a book like this that has the scrapbooking pages. And I kind of liked that. But then I thought, I want to take it one step farther. And so I made my scrapbooking quilt. Now you can go down to Charlotte's and buy this fabric, this nice fabric that you run through your printer and it's already ready for you. At that time, there wasn't such nice fabric and I had to dip it in the solution and then I had to iron it and then you wash it out. It was quite a process, but then it's into the fabric though. It's not like a t-shirt or anything. I had to iron the fabric onto freezer paper also and then run it through my printer. My printer died after that. All those little strings on the side and it all that. This next one is something that happened the millennium, the year 2000. And before the year 2000, people thought that, oh, the computers were all going to crash and the airplanes were going to fall out of the sky and the world was going to come to an end. Well, it didn't. And my friend Carol said she wanted to make a millennium quilt. She wanted to send out 20 different fabrics to all these different people. And then they were supposed to send fabrics back and you're going to end up with 2,000 different fabrics. Well, that's too much work. I didn't want to do that. And I thought, oh, surely I have that many different fabrics. Well, I did not. But at the time, the smallest piece of fabric that they wanted to sell me was 6 inches. So I would go and I bought 6 inches of different fabrics. And you can make 32 2.5-inch squares out of that 6 inches. So I'm starting to cut out all my 32 and I'm stacking them up in my dining room and all over the house. I have all these stacks of 32. And then I had to run to the store. And I left my 3-year-old daughter with her dad. And I came home and it was quiet in the house. He was watching TV and she had all my blocks all over the floor. And so my neighbor, she was married and had 3 teenagers. And she came and got all my blocks and she took them home and she scattered them in her living room and in her dining room. And as they would walk through, they would play matching. And she stacked up all of my 2000s. And so I cut out 32 of those quilts. I only sewed one together, but I cut out 32 of those. They're all different fabrics.
No repeats.
This next one represents strength and courage. I was, my oldest daughter, she came down one day and she wanted to hear my quilt talk. She'd never heard it. And so she's sitting on the couch and I'm pulling out my quilts and telling her my stories. And she gets up and she goes over and gets this quilt and she says, Mom, why isn't this one in your talk? And I said, well, I didn't think I put it together very well. The points didn't come together. And it was just made out of some of the dresses that I was wearing when I was teaching. And she said, but Mom, it does. She said, it deserves to be in your quilt talk because to her, it represented strength and courage. The strength and courage that it took for a woman to leave an abusive relationship with 2 young kids and go back to school and get her teaching degree. And so to her to see those dresses that I wore represented strength and courage. To me, this quilt also represents strength and courage. My oldest daughter, as an adult, went back to school and she got her nursing degree. And now, I like to say this part, but she is the director of nursing in a big nursing home in Sonora, California. So I made her a bigger quilt and I kept borrowing it to do my presentations. So she didn't like me borrowing it all the time. So I made a smaller version of it. And then this is her. She's in her cap and being a nurse. This one documents the birth of a baby. My sister's. My sister had several miscarriages and didn't think that she was going to be able to have any babies. And that, so 9 years ago, 9 years ago, she got pregnant and she had Jackson. And I made her this quilt. And I put the 3 little cabbages on it. We didn't know at the time, but then 4 years after that, she had Lena. And in less than a year, she also had Hendrix. So it's the documentation of 3 babies. This is a documentation of a wedding. Mine. 14 years ago, my husband Curtis, he asked me to marry him, and I wasn't ready at that time. And so I told him, well, when we do, I want you to sing to me at our wedding. And of course he thought, well, he's fairly safe back then. And so he said he would. And 7 years ago, we got married and I held him to it. And he sang Josh Turner, Would You Go With Me? And I didn't want a guest book, so I had people sign a piece of fabric and I appliqued their names then onto the tree. If you ask, he might sing right now. I like to document everything. So this is a documentation of vacation. Last year, Lori and her husband and her dad and stepmom, we went to Mackinac Island. And when I go to places like that, I collect, like I got a tea towel and a bag and anything fabric so that I can put it in a quilt. You're going to see quilts at all stages. Some of them don't have the binding. Some of them are not done quilting. They're just all stages. I didn't go, but Lori and her husband and her dad and stepmom, they went to Portugal and they brought me some fabric. So we made Lori one and her dad one, and then I got this one. I like the colors and the fabrics in Portugal. Also, we went to Asheville, North Carolina. I always forget where that was at. And on the way, we went to a quilt shop, and they had a whole section of African fabrics. And so I started collecting all of them, and I made 3 different quilts like this, and each one of them still have a different fabric. So I got quite a few different ones. I like the way they put the bright colors together, and they just kind of go together.
Yeah, that'd be neat.
So how many of you like to watch Netflix series or Paramount, or just sit and just watch the whole thing? So my sisters wanted me to watch Yellowstone, and I was like, I don't want to watch a Western. I don't want to do that. And then finally I watched it and I liked it. And if anybody, have you seen Yellowstone? Yeah. So Beth, she sits out on the porch a lot, and she has this quilt over her. So I kind of changed it up a little bit. I put a horse in the middle of it, but the one that Beth has over her are those red and black ones. Oh, is that? Yeah. Sorry. Sorry. Oh, sorry. That's hard. And I found a little patch that has the Yellowstone. So I've made 2 more of those. Well, they're in progress. And my 2 sisters, I'm gonna give them one of those. I've documented some of my jobs that I've had. I worked at Health Ministries, and their color is blue and white. If you've seen their sign, it's blue and white. And so I made this quilt, and then I have just the logo here of Health Ministries. Now I have a job. It's COPE, Communities Organizing to Promote Equity. And it's through KU Med. And I get to just help people to find resources or different organizations to help them find what they're looking for. And we also get to do educational presentations. But this is my COPE quilt. I took the runner that we were supposed to use on the table. Cut it up. Good one, yeah. This next quilt goes way back to the 1500s. And during the 1500s, the plague spread across Europe, and it wiped out half of the population. So the rich and the noblemen, they hired these plague doctors who they weren't actually doctors. They were just people who were willing to take the money and go to the different villages and try and find out what was going on and why these people were dying. And so they thought that there was the stench across the land because of all the death. And so they thought that it was being spread through the air that they were breathing. And so they made those big long masks, and they made it out of gauzy fabric, and then they dipped it in wax, and then they put potpourri and oils down in there, and then they wear those masks into the villages, and they thought, oh, that's going to save them from the plague. So this is my plague doctor. And later they found out that the plague was being spread by fleas, and possibly from the birds flying from village to village, but also possibly from the bottom of their cloaks going from village to village. So that's my plague doctor. And now we've had COVID-19. And something that came out of COVID, though, that we weren't expecting, that was the toilet paper shortage. This next quilt represents the nurses and the medical field and the scientists who have been fighting hard against the war against COVID-19. They're tired and they're exhausted, and we still don't know everything about COVID-19, but this is an interpretation of what one nurse, how she felt about COVID. And these little things, my niece, she paper pieced those, the vials and the syringes.
Oh. So. Well.
This is one of my journaling quilts. This one is about friendship. And I think friendship is very important, and maybe even more important than we realize. It's hard to find good friends sometimes, especially friends like mine. They're really hard to find.
Oh.
The lady in the middle, this is my friend Carol, who let me go through her stash. And I gave this presentation and they didn't know I had made this, and they were all at imagine how happy they were. This is about kindness. I think that we should be kinder to one another. If we were kinder to one another, who knows how much our friends would blossom. So this is sow seeds of kindness, watch friends blossom. It's fine. This next quilt is about being grateful. I think we should be more grateful, and not just for the big things in life, but the little everyday things that we have and we do. So this is my grateful turkey, and he says, "Give thanks unto the Lord." This next one is about an event, something that happened 9/11. I was looking online at all the devastation and destruction of 9/11. And when I was looking at those pictures, I saw a little girl, though. She was on a man's shoulders, and she was from some other country, but she was waving the American flag. She was showing her patriotism to the United States. She was showing that there is hope. And so this is my 9/11 quilt, and it says, "We will not forget." And here's the little girl with the flag. Like the little girl who was showing her patriotism to the United States, I decided I wanted to show my patriotism. And so I decided to make a flag quilt. And I got my flags put together, and I thought, well, it needs something else. So I freehand machine embroidery the Pledge of Allegiance. That'll only happen one time.
Oh,
Everyone knows the devastation and destruction of 9/11, but 9/10, the day before that, was the day that we found out my dad had ALS and wouldn't be with us much longer. My dad was someone who always tried to tell us that we need to let go of all the ugliness in our hearts and let there be more love in our hearts and look for the beauty in life if we're all going to be in heaven together someday. So this is in honor of my dad. And it says, life's beauty is found beyond the thorns. People often ask me, why the safety pins? Well, I was hand quilting this, and I don't know that I'll ever be finished with it. So the pins are just still in it. Okay. Like I say, my dad tried to instill in us that we need to let go of all the ugliness and all the bad things in our hearts. Let there be more love in our hearts. Maybe if we had more love in our hearts, then there could be peace in our country. So this is let there be love in our hearts, let there be peace in our country. After my dad passed away, I had a really hard time in my life. I was lost and lonely and afraid. And I didn't know who was out there to help me, who was there to hurt me. And I didn't know which way to go or what to do. And so a lot like the slaves as they fled the plantations, I just ran. I ran from everything and everybody. I even thought I was running from God. And then one day I came here to Newton and I found a little apartment. I was so grateful for that little apartment. I would just walk down the hallway and I would look up to God and just say, thank you, Lord. There were some women in the community who had donated some brand new bath towels to Save Hope, the domestic violence center here in town. And they gave some of those towels to me. And I just thought they were so beautiful, sitting on my shelf in the bathroom. So this is in honor of Save Hope and the many, many services that they provided me at that time. I gave this presentation here at the library several years ago. And afterwards, this man came up to me and he said, I'd like to talk to you about this quilt. I said, okay. So he said that he was the man who designed the logo for St. Hope. And he said, I feel like I designed that with your story in mind. He said that he put the oak tree to represent the strength that it takes for an abused woman to leave. And he had the birds to represent her fleeing or flying from that abuse. I thought things were going good. I had my little apartment. I had my job. My kids were doing good. I was doing good. And then one day, God sent some new people into my life. He sent some people I didn't know. Sent some people I had never even met before. These people came and they said they believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. These people said that they wanted to help me to build a better life for me and my family. These people said they wanted to help me to build a new house, a new home. And they did. Harvey County Habitat for Humanity came, and together we built a new home. Oh, that's them actually working on my house. They're actual pictures. This next quilt represents the 27 different homes that opened their doors and allowed me to stay in their homes so that I never once had to sleep in the van that I was living out of.
My God.
Habitat for Humanity gave me stability and the ability to make better decisions for me and my family. They showed me friendship and love. But I think most of all, Habitat for Humanity gave me hope, hope for the future. And once you have hope, anything is possible. So this is my tree of hope. You need to be. With the help of different organizations and my friends and my family, but most of all, because of the grace of God, now I know that my soul is free. And this is my soul is free. That's supposed to be a silhouette of my face. My son drew my face, but I didn't get the nose quite right. It might have been organizations like Habitat for Humanity, Safe Hope, the Big Brothers Big Sisters, COPE, and many, many others. They do make a difference in people's lives. They empower families to change their lives in our communities. But it takes all of us working together to make them successful. So reach out and be a little kinder to your neighbor. Tell the cashier at the grocery store, thank you. Just give someone a smile. In life, we all make mistakes and fall, and sometimes we lose sight of God. It's unavoidable. But when it happens, you have to choose to get back up. No matter how big your difficulties feel right now, you don't have to stay down. There's always help, hope, love, and support available to get you through the darkest times. But it starts with you. So take a deep breath, keep fighting, and ask for help. Today, I see hope more clearly, and yet I have no idea what's going to happen next. I make plans, but God always seems to work through wonderful people, revealing something bigger, better, and more beautiful than I ever could have imagined. I don't know what's going to happen next. I just know that it's going to be enough. I hope my story can help someone who is facing similar challenges, because I believe that hope and strength can be found in sharing our journeys and experiences. I see life as a gift and a responsibility, and I feel that it's my responsibility to use what God has given me to help others. I'd like to thank you for coming tonight. I have a couple more that I'd like to show you. Not this one. After a lot of hard work and time, I now know that I am enough. But at the same time, I would like for all of you to know that you are enough. This is just a self-portrait. I hope that I've inspired you a little bit tonight. I would love for each one of you to go home and pull out a needle and a thread, because I would love for each one of you to quilt. Thank you.
I'm curious, did you quilt all of these? Or-
Either I did or my mom did.
Wow, you have a long arm quilt.
Well, I do now. Mom had one that it was muscle powered. And so she did quite a few of them, and now I have computerized long arm.
Where do you keep all of these quilts?
All of them that are in my top, I bought this cabinet. And I can fold them about this wide, and they're very long, and they all go on that one cabinet.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But there's quilts all over my house. Everywhere.
All stages.
So can you tell us about the ones behind you?
Oh. Well, this is Kate. You say Kate or Kate? Kate. It's a designer, and his are all bright and vibrant, and put them together like this, and it just kind of taped them all down. This is called hanging basket. And this was one that, I don't know why I made that. No,
That was on our Facebook page.
yes,
Yeah.
it's very, I want to look at it. Yeah.
So you can see the box if you're pretty.
Oh, what is the fabrics are ombre, so they go from light to dark, and then the dots get thicker when it's the darker, and so makes it real interesting.
Well, they always tell us to label our quilts.
Oh my goodness, I'm terrible with that. I should be that. My niece Diane, she has them labeled, and she has a book. She's got them all with pictures, and
How many have you got?
I have no clue. I really have no idea. I should have kept track, but I'll go into somebody's home. Not too long ago, I went into a friend's house and looking at them. I've seen that before too. You made that for them. How many are here? There's probably 75, I think.
Wow.
And they're heavy. And my husband went and bought a dolly this weekend because it's heavy to carry it out.
Okay, I have a feeling that people that already know, but what is paper piecing?
Paper piecing?
Is that what you said?
Yeah. The pattern that you're gonna use, it's gonna be printed off onto a piece of paper, and then you put your two fabrics together. It's upside down and backwards, and then when you fold it over, then you sew another piece and fold it over. Like
Oh, okay, cool.
you have to think further to get started.
How old were you when you started the quilt?
I have always sewn and made a few quilts, but I have a son who is 28. And when he was little, he didn't sleep very well. And so that's when my family said I started power quilting. I just did it to stay awake. Just got out of
Checking Facebook to see if they.
What do you use for batting?
cotton, polyester blend. There's some over there that's polyester, some of the older ones, but cotton is nice.
Some of them have a very large print. It looks like they were printed pictures that were the centerpieces, like the Yellowstone one with the big horse.
Oh,
Are those? How do you find those? Do they sell those at quilt shops or?
They're panels. Yeah,
Mhm.
you can buy a panel and then you just build around it.
Wow.
Those are fun sometimes. Yeah, make them. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, let's do that.
Ever since elementary school, I haven't been able to cut straight. So
We can fix that.
Yeah.
Big rulers and.
Wow.
Pizza cutter.
Okay.
Pizza cutter. Wow.
No, that's what you understand. Yeah, okay. Perfect. I'm just trying to help.
When you do these, all the different nonprofits and things, and it sounds like it takes a good number of hours to do each quilt. So do you find yourself kind of devoting that time to reflecting on the subject of your quilt and maybe getting a more understanding of things?
Definitely. And if I'd had a stressful day, my clients needed a lot of things or something was going on in their life, I just sit down into my sewing machine and it all just goes away.
Awesome. Fantastic. Yeah.
It is a form of therapy, right?
Yes, definitely. Form of therapy.
Reconnect.
You want to use the mic or?
Did you use a lot of different patterns to make quilts? Like you never used just one, you used different ways?
Or you have to have all the things. We can help you get going. The applique, I really enjoy applique. Then you can just cut out anything and just sew it onto your quilts. You can be real creative with that. That's
Good color.
well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I have made a few, I get carried away out of them. I've been making bags, so if you're interested in bags, Kaylee and Diane can help you with that.
Yeah, so take a look back there and yeah,
I don't make just one of anything.
we're open until 8, so there's plenty of time to mill around, hang out and chit chat. So yeah,
Thank you.
thank you.